Hey, welcome everybody to the Your Baby is Here catch-up group. We have the lovely Kate here once again to talk to us about our pelvic floor and all things in the pelvis. And so while you're listening to this, you've got to do your pelvic floor exercises. That's what I find myself doing when I listen to she has that effect on people. So I'm going to hand over to Kate. Thanks, Kate, for coming.
Thanks, Tracy. I love doing these. Education is such an important thing for me and part of what I do work-wise. So it's nice to be able to do it on this platform for the Transform Parenting community. So it's great. So yes, my name is Kate. There's a little
That's all good. I've muted her.
Oh, fabulous. So I am the founder of Sound CPR. I am one of the women's health physios here. Just a little bit about Sound. We are a multidisciplinary team. So it's not just the women's health physio here. There's also a whole heap of other awesome services. Today in particular, we are talking specifically about pelvic floor. So everything you need to know about the pelvic floor in the postnatal period. This is a topic that I can talk on, so I try to just condense it to like the key facts for you guys. I was just going to say a little bit about what women's health physio is. So I think some people still don't really know, and that's totally fine. It is just an extra facet of physiotherapy. So it does require an extra qualification. And so really we look at anything that's pelvic floor related. So whether that's bladder, bowel, intercourse related issues, menstruation issues across the lifespan, anything the pelvic floor impacts on it is kind of what we're delving into and trying to help with issues in that space. So the main points for today is really just talking about what and where the pelvic floor is, how we're trying to strengthen it, why it's so important. I think sometimes understanding that then helps with the motivation for good regular pelvic floor exercise, and just talking through some of the goals for the recovery postnatally, and if there's a bit of time, just mentioning how to return to sport and exercise safely. So where and what is it? So the pelvic floor, we can see this picture here, is a bowl-like structure. I'll just bring a little highlighter up. Perfect. So it does run from the pubic bone all the way to the tailbone. So often that does surprise some people. This picture does make it look quite sort of skinny and hammocky, but it is more like a bowl-like structure. You know, the pelvis is a round opening, pelvic floor is a bowl type structure there. It's made up of muscle and tissue and fascia, so not just muscle alone, but it really does control the opening, so keeping us continent, but also supports these pelvic organs that sit up in that pelvic cavity. Ideally with pelvic floor, when it's at rest, like I said, it does sit more like a bowl. And then as we contract pelvic floor, we're trying to get this lift, but also then like a shortening and tightening of the muscles there. Just that kind of visual cue. In terms of strengthening pelvic floor, it is a very individualized thing. So part of what my job is to work out what the best cue for you is and work with you to identify that. I tend to go through more of an anatomical cue to start people off with. I just find that works best for the majority of people. And then when we actually do a pelvic floor assessment, we can really tailor that and do extra cues and things like that to get that pelvic floor working super effectively. So that individual assessment will then give you immediate feedback on working out what that cue is. Some of the extra cues I'll use kind of represented in these random little pictures I put here. They don't look very pelvic floor related. So we've got our bowl. So using that visual of a bowl and trying to lift in. But sometimes things like picking up a pea or picking up a blueberry can help really hone in on pelvic floor. Drawing fluid up a straw often is a good one too. So those are just some examples of other ways we get pelvic floor firing. What I would like to do with everyone there at home, no matter what position you're in, we're going to try and go through this anatomical cue to see if you can kind of pull that pelvic floor on. So the goal is to start from back passage first. We want to keep the glutes relaxed, but we do want to tighten as if we're trying to hold wind. Most people have had to do that at some point in their life, so it's usually a good cue to start with. Then we're thinking about squeezing from the entrance of the vagina, or even like we're trying to stop the flow of urine mid-flow to bring in that front cue. And ideally, the direction is from back to front and up towards the belly button. And often when we think up towards the belly button, we'll get a little bit of tightening around that belly button area, and that is okay. We don't want to get all of our bigger global muscles coming on all the time with pelvic floor, but naturally the tummy should tighten a little bit because of the co-contraction that happens with pelvic floor and our deeper tummy muscles. So whatever position you're in, whether you're sitting, standing, lying, carrying a baby, not carrying a baby, let's try and do this pelvic floor squeeze. So we want to tighten from back passage like we're trying to hold wind, squeeze like we're stopping the flow of urine mid-flow, draw up to the belly button, and then trying to relax off. Ideally, we want to feel that good on and off with that movement. So that is a really big thing with pelvic floor. The relax off is just as important to get that good quality contraction. And that's because we can develop what we call a more high tone or overactive pelvic floor if we're not controlling that relax off. There are some other things that predispose us to a high tone pelvic floor, and those are sort of the things that I will work through when I'm going through taking someone's history. There are some things that can identify or suggest that someone has a high tone pelvic floor. So at rest, that high tone pelvic floor might sit here instead of sitting down here. And so when we try to lift, when we're already quite tight, it's a small but often an unfunctional lift. So sometimes people might still leak. And sometimes that leaking symptoms, people think it's weak, I need to keep strengthening it. And so they keep working hard, but actually contributing to the problem. So what we do when we have a high tone pelvic floor is quite different. But the other common symptom that people might have is they have a pain presentation. So pain, like the common ones would be like pain with tampon use or pain with intercourse, because the muscles literally just get so tight that it's hard for anything to penetrate through there. That said, in the postnatal period, sometimes we will have discomfort with returning to intercourse. But again, that can just be as our body's recovering and things like that. But it is something I do talk to my clients about and help them with if it isn't improving. So yeah, just another facet of things that we talk through as women's health physios. So just to delve a little more into the strength side of things, ideally we're trying to do two types of pelvic floor strength exercises. So we want a mix of some long holds and then a mix of these quick flick type exercises. With our long holds, there is a lot of generic advice about doing 10 lots of 10 seconds. This is actually really hard, and particularly in the postnatal period, that's a really long time to do a good quality hold. So the goal is to try and work out, you could be doing this in the meantime, work out what you think you can hold lift on, hold really well, and then relax off. Rather than lifting on and then it's slowly coming off and not feeling that clear relax off. So you could be trying to work out what you feel those numbers are for you, using those anatomical cues we talked about. It could be 6 seconds, it could be 3, it could be really anything. And then you want to try and see how many reps of that you can do where it still feels really good, rather than getting this drop off or not feeling anything relax off. Just on, off, on, off, on, off. We want max on and then complete relax off. Often what I do see is people do try to go too quick with these, and they lift on and then they half relax off. They lift on, half, and then they just get stuck on not feeling anything. So certainly early on as we're recovering, we're trying to build some of that pelvic floor strength. I usually encourage people to still do a quick lift on, but then slowly breathe and relax and make sure that you're fully off before we lift on again. As we get stronger and that recovery continues, it does start to look a little bit more like this. I think at the end of the day with pelvic floor, just like any exercise, the goal is very much quality of the lift. So less lifts, but a better quality are going to give you a better training effect in the long run, pelvic floor wise. Just generally, I do recommend 3 to 4 times a day to all my postnatal women. It usually means that it gets done 1 to 2 times a day. And I'm usually really happy with it if people come back and say 1 to 2 times a day. Some positions will be easier and harder than others. So lying is technically the easiest, not lifting against gravity. Sitting is a bit harder. Standing is harder again. And I guess part of good pelvic floor function is just being able to have that awareness of being on or off, depending on what position you are in, and then modifying the numbers so that it's always a good quality no matter what position you're in.